At our agency, zerogrowth.com, we regularly run user tests. Now, there are two types of user tests that you can run. You have the online version, and then you have the in-person version. Now, with these, you also have many sub-variations. So we're going to focus on what we have found to work best in our 7 years of finding this and doing this over and over again. And here, then, I'll share some golden nuggets on the mistakes that we've learned along the way and the best practices we've found to do this, because there really isn't that much material on how to exactly do it for e-commerce stores in general in a practical level. Now, when should you consider doing this? So I think in general it can be super helpful if you have already taken care of the main issues and if you are running out of additional, more like obvious things to improve on your store. So this is never a process that we start from, and it's not something that we include in our month one, so to say, because here there usually are so many things that an expert can pick apart from the site and reason it so well as to why this should be changed, so that this user test would just mainly focus on those issues in the first place, and it's not the direct line to the goal. Here, so when you start to get super experienced with your site, you also start to get blinded to how people use it. And then you might start to struggle a little bit in finding improvement opportunities. So user testing can be a great tool in understanding that part. So generally speaking, to summarize, it is not your biggest bang for the buck. It's not your lowest hanging fruit. However, once you have taken care of those major issues, user testing can be super helpful as a tool. Now, when you hire for usability, because you do need an audience, you need a testing plan, and then you need analysis. Those are the three components. So it makes sense to worry about the hiring one first, because often that can be a quite difficult one, especially if you are running a niche site, and if you are also possibly running it in a country that doesn't have as many language speakers, etc. So there, the first challenge is to get a representative audience. Now, if you want to cut a little bit of a corners, you could just get the demographics, but ideally we also get the psychographics. So it's not as black and white that all women 55 to 65 would be the same. If you can control the psychographical interests as well by specifically recruiting certain types of people, your user testing will have the right people in it. So that is something where you can use your existing customer list, you can use Facebook groups, you can use forums, these kinds of things in order to find these people. And then this is what we call a representative sample. And getting the representative sample right is crucially important, because if you don't, you will have skewed results. So the results will be not aligned with your target demographics or psychographics, etc. It will be from people that are not your customers. Now, in terms of test setup, we've always found that the best bang for the buck is online. However, sometimes finding people offline can be easier. So there is a little bit of a combination here that can be useful. So here in general, with online, there's minimal drawback to this approach. You don't need a laboratory because things happen on the computer anyway. Not that you necessarily need it on the offline part anyway. You can go to Starbucks or something like that. And that's generally the recommended method for it. Now, in terms of budgets for both online and offline, usually it starts from a few hundred USD, euro online. And offline generally can be a little bit more expensive. It also depends on your setup and recruiting though. If you are doing it yourself, then generally it's of course going to be more of a time cost than it is going to be a cost for you specifically. When it comes to the offline test, usually there is some kind of incentives. This actually applies to online as well, where people will get paid to take these tests, so you kind of compensate them for their time. In the online world, it can lead to a little bit of a game where many people will just try to get through the test as fast as possible, provide quick answers and test kinds of things. So you want to watch out for that and generally make the tests as long as possible to maximize that time. So if you are paying for 20 minutes, for example, then you'd want to have 40 minutes of questions, just in case somebody's trying to go through them so fast, and then you won't be wasting your money. Now, usually we have the device split and demographics according to Google Analytics. So if you have these kinds of things very specified, you can then search for that as well with your user testing. So one thing that we found to be very useful is to use qualifying questions. So even if a testing tool would not have this availability where you can filter by device type, you can ask that as the first question and then have all the people that answer the one that you don't want to have be disqualified from the test. They don't know which ones they should choose. Sometimes you want to go the opposite way and you actually want to have the ones that you want to stay answer no, because sometimes people can also think through these things. Also, if you want to certain city like London, for example, you can then also define that on there. Now, usually you have two main choices when it comes to online testing. So you have doing it through a testing platform. So a testing platform could be like a usertesting.com or Usability Hub or Userfeel, these kinds of things. You can Google those if you want to. They are typically slightly more expensive than doing it the Zoom way when it comes to money, but you will save a lot of time using them. So in general, I find it's a little bit better of an option than doing the test via, say, a Zoom call. But on the Zoom call, you can have a more moderated experience. So it can be a little bit of more of an interview. Whereas with this unmoderated one where you are using a testing platform and they are going through a preset selected questions, then they will be going through that question stack and you can't actually ask them additional questions afterward. So that is something to consider. If you are doing the moderated one, you usually need less people because it is more in-depth and more insightful in many ways, but you just do the qualitative approach there, whereas on the user testing platform, you can overcome that with quantity. When it comes to the user testing platforms, we usually like 10 participants, so each represents 10% of the distribution, and with 10 participants, we can usually find the major flaws and concerns already, whereas after that, you start hitting diminishing returns very, very quickly. With moderated tests, you usually need a little bit less, so something like 5 or so is a good number there, because it also, if it takes an hour to go through a call like that, then it will already be 5 hours of your time. So you start hitting that period where now it's so time consuming that you might actually just postpone it, and being able to do the test is way better than not being able to do the test at all. Next thing that is very important in the testing process is setting the right stage and the situation for the prospect. So here you have a person who usually you want to align from their thinking to what the customers would probably think. So in this kind of case, like you are searching for a warm summer jacket, for example, or something like this, where you are trying to put the user into a situation where the client would possibly be in. So they're like, you don't want them to just come randomly to the site and like browse around type of thing. You want them to have a mission, because people, most of the time buyers, do have some kind of pain or want that they are looking to solve or fulfill. Then next thing here is very important to ask the right questions. So think of the so what question when you ask these questions. So if you are asking a question of like, how good is the website from 1 to 5, for example, and then people answer 2, then like, kind of like, so what? Where are you supposed to go with that? Like, so that's like, yeah, it's like in the category of like true but useless. So we wouldn't want to go there. So if you don't see this question answering the so what question, then change the question. So they should be providing answers most likely that are helpful, that you're at least expecting to be helpful. In general, with these questions and your question stack when it comes to user testing, you'd want to ask yourself, what types of insights do you wish to receive? Because the insights that you are after are the insights that you can then try to focus the question stack around. So if you have a particular problem that you are possibly thinking, and okay, people are abandoning the checkout, then we definitely want to focus the questions and the test more on the checkout as opposed to just looking and giving feedback on your about us page, for example. Timing wise, usually we have 20 to 40 minutes per test subject on these tests. So with the unmoderated one, so those are the testing tools, we've always found that 20 minutes is plenty of time to go through those things. And most likely the real customers wouldn't spend more time than that anyway. With the interview method, where you are having them on a Zoom call with yourself, typically that tends to take more time. There's just things to explain, there's things to go over, some more in-depth questions and some more of an interview as opposed to just the test. So there we found that 40 minutes works really well. It means that you can also slot them in 1 hour slots, so you can go through them more of people in a shorter period of time. One thing here is to really be as curious as possible. So ask a ton of questions. There is often no need to be shy about these questions, since many people will just answer them quickly. So you really need to be question ready when you take on these challenges. And so you have many people skipping these questions. You can ask why multiple times on these moderated ones and really try to get to them. Many times people can be a little bit overly polite. Of course, you are also looking to hinder this, so asking be as straight as possible on the Zoom version. But it is a little bit of a game sometimes where people want to move forward fast. So make sure that you are winning that game. All right, when it comes to the findings and the actual report, so here we have talked about the recruitment, we have talked about the actual running of the test. Now, how do we find and summarize the test findings? This is important for internal purposes, but it's also important for you. So there's all this user testing data that is now all over the place, and you don't really have a tangible way to understand it just from the testing platform. Or if you try to recall it from your memory, it's also going to be very flawed, because you're going to remember some interviews and experiences more than others, just because other people are more memorable than other people. And also some people might be a bit more vocal and expressive emotionally, so you're more likely to remember those things. So we want to make sure that we overcome those biases, and the best way to do that is with a summary or a report. And the goal here is for all the stakeholders to be able to understand the issues and suggestions exactly. So then when you make changes to your site, it's not a surprise for people why this was done. And I think in general it's a good thing to champion this as well, because then you do put more effort into your CRO program once everyone understands the value of this. So key areas here, I think it's a generally good thing to be linear here. So you can start from the recruiting part, outline which people are in the thing, what's their age groups, devices, that kind of thing. And from there, you can give a summary of the findings. First impressions is usually a place where people focus on first. This usually gets people engaged with the report as well, because then they are going to be a little bit curious about, okay, what's beyond the first impressions? How did it end? That kind of thing. I like the summary of key questions, both from a data-driven and qualitative perspective. So you have the summary on, okay, 9 out of 10 people did this. And then you have some qualitative quotes that can emphasize the findings or that were particularly interesting in that test. And generally we wrap this up with overall issues. So making sense of the entire thing and then summarizing what are the biggest issues and then turning those into suggestions. So that's the user testing part. Typically, the things to watch out for and where it goes wrong is when you have bad instructions. So you just basically have them use your site. So, okay, use my site instead of go find a handbag that is light blue that is waterproof, for example. That's a clear instruction, and then they will go and navigate that. Then sometimes you will see that people are using bad processes, so they're just doing random things, and people are not encouraged to speak up. So you want to really make sure that people are also encouraged to give their feedback, and you're not going to get hurt by it. And lastly, many people don't really know the questions and these kinds of open-ended methods of getting the right input from the test subjects. So it just ends up being a bit of a yes-no party. So those are the user testing insights that we found, the major ones at least. Hope you enjoyed the video. I'm Samuel Larsen, the founder of crogrowth.com, where you can also apply to work with us. If you are curious about running a user test for your site, you may not have the time, interest, attention span, etc. to do it yourself. You understand that by working with an expert team who have done dozens of these before, you will get better results than you would by yourself, save yourself a ton of time and be able to focus on the other areas of your business. If that sounds good to you, I hope it will, go to crogrowth.com/apply and we'll take it from there. Thank you very much for watching. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Like the video. If you've watched it this far, you obviously like the stuff. And I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.